All right, ladies and gents, welcome to today's lab where we are going to be making our own mozzarella cheese. Now, if you've never had fresh mozzarella before, the flavor is mind-blowing compared to those blocks of mozzarella cheese that you see in the grocery store. We're going to be doing this completely by hand. So this is a bit technical, but it is possible, and the end results are delicious. They are amazing in like caprese salads. They're great in the summertime with some fresh summer tomatoes. It is great with bread. It is also phenomenal to make an appetizer with using just kind of a breading to fry that and then also serve that with a sauce tomate. Now, before we get started, there is a really important thing that you need to understand about your ingredients. The most important ingredient with milk, you want to splurge and try to get the best quality milk that you can. The important thing with making mozzarella, we are going to be basically undoing the proteins that are in the milk and then recoagulating them together. If you used ultra pasteurized milks from the grocery store, those proteins are cooked to a point where we're not going to be able to unravel those proteins. So, super important, make sure you buy a milk that is either low pasteurized or just pasteurized. Do not use ultra temperature or ultra pasteurized milk. Also, if you can, try to go with non-homogenized milk. What that means is whenever milk is made, you have fat and water, or whey, in this case, kind of forced together. What will happen is naturally the cream or the fat wants to float on the top and all the liquid wants to sink to the bottom. In order to prevent that from happening, what manufacturers do is they take the milk and they squeeze it through a very, very, very small little hose, and that basically forces the fat and the milk to come together and stay together and it doesn't separate. For this case, we want to, if you can, try to go with a non-homogenized milk. It'll say on the label somewhere here. First things first, we're going to take a half gallon of our high quality milk here, and we are going to just simply pour that into our pot. All right, so I've got my half gallon of milk sitting here, and in a bowl, in a separate bowl, I'm going to take 125 milliliters of water. And in there, I'm going to dissolve about 4 grams of citric acid. Okay. And what this citric acid is going to do, it's going to slightly acidify the milk here. So we can have the milk at the right conditions for it to then coagulate when we add in our rennet later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just simply swirl the milk here, and I'm going to add in my water and citric acid. Okay, just going to swirl that in. Okay, and on the heat it goes. All right, so we're gonna put the milk on the stove. We're gonna put it on about medium-low heat until this gets to about 92 to 93 degrees. This is very precise, so make sure that your thermometer is calibrated here. You wanna make sure that you put this in ice water first, the thermometer in ice water, and make sure it's reading within a degree or two of 32 degrees, which is the freezing point of water. So, I'm gonna put my thermometer in here. I will try not to mess with this, maybe occasionally stir it, but I'm just gonna let that go, and then once I hear the thermometer beep at me, then I'm going to check on this and go to the next step. All right, that is my thermometer going off. So I am going to firstly turn off the heat, and what I'm going to do is I've got my rennet in the water, and I'm going to, using a metal spoon, do not use wood for this, I'm going to very, very gently kind of swirl the milk. Now I'm kind of going in a very gentle like figure 8 pattern here, but I'm just doing that just enough that when I slowly pour in my rennet, it gets distributed into this mixture evenly. Okay, I don't want to be overly aggressive here. Just take it nice and easy. All right, there we go. Okay, Now I'm going to just kind of stop the milk from swirling around too much. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just wait for about 5 to 10 minutes. And what's going to happen here is the rennet is an enzyme, and it's going to coagulate the milk. And you're going to see the milk on the very edges start to separate from the casein, separate from the whey. And then those curds is what's going to create our mozzarella. So I'll cut back here in about 10 minutes or so. Remember, take this off the heat, and I'll see you again in a little bit. All right, so if you look at the very top here, you can see that the milk has actually kind of separated, or I should say the casein has separated from the whey. That is perfect. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut the curd here using 2 flat edge spatulas. And the way that I am going to do that is I'm going to kind of go in a checkerboard pattern where I'm just going to take a flat edge spatula and just run my flat edge spatula and cut the curd here. Just going to make sure that the curd is set. Yep. And I'm just going to just simply run my knife through the curd. Now we'll then cross the other direction and cut it again. Okay. And you can see, if you're very, very gentle, you can see the cheese is separating into its individual curds. Okay, perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. So now at this point, I'm going to turn the heat back on to really, really low heat. So medium low at the highest. And this is all about temperature control. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very, very gently just kind of force the curd together. And I'm going to wait until this gets up to about 105 degrees. No hotter than that. Again, go slow. Have your thermometer ready and set for maybe a degree or two sooner than that. And I'm just going to very carefully push this and just stir it together. Again, looks very ugly now, but when we're able to stretch and fold it, it'll be really, really nice. Okay. From here, I'm going to turn off the heat. And I'm just going to wait another 5 minutes here and just let this sit. Probably best to get a lid and to cover this, but you can do whatever you want here. But just let this sit now for about 5 minutes. All right. From here, I'm just going to scoop the curds out, and I'm going to put it into a strainer. Now, ideally, you would want to have a cheesecloth over this. I do not have that, so I'm just going to be putting it through a fine strainer. But I'm just going to get all of the curd out and just scoop it right into here. Try not to force the curds through the strainer so it leaks into the water below. Now, you want to take your time during this step. One thing you don't want to do, and I just kind of did this here, is I got a little impatient and I picked up the pot and tried to strain it through here. You don't want to do that. You want to just take a spoon and just patiently scoop the curds and stuff into here, okay? You won't get all of them, but you'll get most of them. Now, I'm going to let this strain a little bit more until I can actually form it together with my hands. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reheat this whey up, and I'm going to reheat it to about 180 degrees. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to use the heat from this to melt and be able to make this malleable and stretchable with my hand. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to let this continue to strain because I was impatient. And then I will see you back in a little bit. You should be able to take most of the curd and basically squeeze it in your hands and keep it held together like this. So I'm going to take the curd and just kind of squeeze out some of the excess whey and try to just kind of force this blob of, milk protein to just kind of force it to come together. It's a little bit of a messy process, but it's fun. All right, so I'm going to take my curd and transfer it into this bowl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the whey that is heated up to about 180 degrees, some of the excess whey here. And I'm going to use the heat to make this kind of malleable and stretchy. So, let me make sure my whey is hot enough. And it is. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my whey here, and I'm just going to ladle it right over the top of this. And I want to cover it with the hot whey. And what that's going to do is it's going to make this able to be stretched. Now, you can just use hot water, but I figure since we have this hot liquid ready, that'd be perfect. I'm also going to season this water with my salt, with about 5 grams or so, or about half a tablespoon of salt. I'm going to let that sit for about 10-15 seconds. All right, now this is going to be a little hard to describe. Now this is very, very hot, so try to get gloves on just for a little bit of protection. If it's a little bit too hot, you can use a spatula here. But what you're going to do is you're going to kind of grab the curd and just kind of try to stretch it. So I'm just taking the mozzarella and I'm just kind of stretching it. It may not be very workable at the start, so that's when you put it back in, just let it kind of loosen up again. And then you pick up the cheese and then just try to kind of stretch it out. All the while, I'm just kind of forcing my fingers together to just kind of take any bits and pieces and stuff that are in the cheese or that's kind of floating in the water here and just kind of forcing it into the log. And you can see, while it is still a little crumbly at first, as I kind of stretch it and fold it amongst yourself, it becomes a little bit more glossy, a little bit more shiny. Okay, and as I feel it start to kind of rip and tear, I'll put it back into the bowl. Now, if you feel that this is too brittle, like it's not working with you, then you can heat the mixture back up. You can pop it in the microwave for maybe like 10 seconds or so. I would try to avoid doing that, but you can do it if you need to. So again, stretch, kind of fold amongst itself. What I can do is I can kind of stretch it while pulling it apart, folding amongst itself, stretch, fold. It's a lot of fun. It's very satisfying once you get it right. Okay, so again, as I pull, I kind of notice, okay, the cheese is becoming a little bit brittle. So I'm going to just kind of put it back in here and I'll let it set just for a little bit. Okay, so I'm getting close to happy with this as far as where I want it. And okay, so what I'm going to do here, see if I can kind of zoom in. There we go. Is I'm going to take my mozzarella ball, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of try to fold it amongst itself, or kind of almost like create a little dough ball here. And I'm going to kind of force it into a ball, and then using my fingers, I'm just going to kind of pinch it underneath itself. And just kind of squeeze and tighten it on the bottom. And there we have some fresh mozzarella. Now you can kind of, if you want to keep this more as a rectangle, or sorry, an oval, you can kind of shape it and squeeze it into that shape. I'm going to try to keep it more of a ball shape. That's just my personal preference. But there we have it. Now, as you practice this or you get a little bit better, you'll be able to kind of get more yield out of this. For me, I left a lot of like kind of curds in the bowl. But again, I'm fairly new at this, but it is really, really fun to make. All right, so from there, I'm going to show you what to do next as far as storage. Now, if you want to, you don't have to make a bigger mozzarella ball. You can make a little bunch of little tiny mozzarella balls. These are really good for like salads and other little things where you just want a little bite-sized piece of mozzarella. And there we have our little mozzarella bowl. Now, as far as service and storage, personally, I prefer having it the day it was made. So mozzarella cheese just tastes really, fresh mozzarella cheese just tastes amazing, has a lot of nuanced flavor that you slightly lose if you do refrigerate it, but I understand not everyone's gonna eat all this cheese at once. So I am going to take some of the whey that's cold now. I chilled this in an ice bath and I strained it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cover the cheese in a bowl, and I will just take a bit of plastic wrap and cover that, and I'm going to label it. Now, I know as far as food safety, according to ServSafe, you get 7 days for TCS food, including the day, the first day being the day that it was made. However, really for its best quality, you really don't want to go any further than 2 or 3 days. 4 and 5, the quality just starts to degrade so much that it really isn't worth it. So I would personally label it for only like 2 or 3 days out. But from here, you can just store this in the fridge covered. And as far as all of the leftover whey, do not throw this away. While this is a little bit thinner than normal milk, you can drink it as is. One of my favorite things to do with this is if you're making soups or sauces or anything that you need a little bit of like kind of a milky richness to it or a little pleasant sweetness too. This is really, really good. It's really good as a base for chowders and soups. One also thing you can do with this is that you can actually use this in bread baking. If you're making a loaf or anything like that, instead of using water, use some of the whey. It adds a little bit of a richness to it. Some of the sugars that are in there will help your crust like caramelize a little bit more, and it'll just enhance the flavor of what you're making. But other than that, that is pretty much it. From here, you can serve this however you like. Perhaps in another video, I will show you some couple serving suggestions. But for now, that is it for today.